My husband had been unreachable for almost 3 days. He said,
"I won't reply for a while."
but my concerns were growing. I thought I should contact the police soon. Just as I was thinking that, I got a call from one of my subordinates. "Ma'am, your husband passed away in an accident." Huh? Why did she call me? I couldn't think about that right now. I hurried to the hospital. There, I saw my husband's unrecognizable body. My name is Harper, 28 years old. I got married 2 years ago and live with my husband while working at an IT company. We want to have children someday, but not yet. My husband's name is Christopher, 2 years older than me. He is very dedicated to his job. Just the other day, there was talk of him getting a promotion. That day, as soon as he got home from work, he happily rushed up to me.
"Harper, listen, I might get a position soon."
"Really? That's amazing."
"Yeah, I'm so happy. It's been tough, but I'm glad I worked hard."
"Christopher, you've been working so much on your days off. I'm really happy for you. Congratulations." Yes, my husband was so dedicated to his job that he gave up his days off to work. He often worked late and came home just before the date changed. I worried about his heavy workload at times, but finally, it paid off. Seeing my husband so happy made me feel happy too. I can't lose either, I thought. I'll try harder too. However, since that day, I started to notice something off about Christopher. His overtime increased even more, and he wouldn't come home until after midnight. His weekend work, which used to be only a few times a month, gradually increased. And last month, he went to work, even on Saturdays. Not only that, but I felt his attitude towards me had become somewhat cold. We used to go out on our days off, but that stopped recently. Isn't that strange? Why doesn't he seem at all tired, despite working so hard? Concerned, I decided to suddenly ask my husband about it. I waited for him to come home late from work and brought up the conversation. "Hey, Christopher, can I talk to you for a minute?"
"What? I'm tired and want to sleep."
"Lately, you're always on your phone before bed. Even though you come home late, aren't you getting sleep deprived?"
"What are you trying to say? How I spend my free time is my business, right?"
"That might be true, but are you really that busy with work?" At my question, his expression stiffened for a moment. Not missing that, I pressed him further. "I understand you have a lot to do since you got promoted, but isn't it too hard? You have too many weekend work days. And isn't it bad for the company to overwork employees?"
"I have no choice. I'm not doing overtime and weekend work because I want to."
"But isn't it too much?"
"You don't understand my job, Harper, do you? Don't butt in when I'm tired from work."
With that, Christopher left the living room. After that, my uneasy feelings didn't go away. Then one day, I usually commuted by car, but on my way home from work, I got into an accident. I was rear-ended by another car and taken to the hospital by ambulance. I had bruises all over my body. After several tests to be safe, I was told to stay in the hospital for a few days. To have a change of clothes brought to me, I called my husband. However, no matter how many times I called, he didn't answer, and he didn't reply to the messages I sent. He should be done with work by now, so why? Until now, we could at least exchange messages during his overtime. I kept calling him every few minutes, and it finally connected an hour later. As I tried to explain the situation, he let out a big sigh.
Ugh, you're so persistent. Can't you tell I'm working overtime if I don't answer the phone?
"I'm sorry, but that's not the issue right now."
"Huh? What do you mean?"
"Actually, I got into an accident on my way home, and I'm in the hospital now. My whole body hurts, but they said there's no life-threatening injuries."
"An accident? Ugh, what a pain you're causing."
I involuntarily let out a, "Huh?" at his unexpected response. He continued mercilessly, as I was at a loss for words.
"Stop getting into accidents when I'm busy. I'm not paying for the car repairs, all right?"
"I understand, but I need you to bring me a change of clothes."
"What? Why do I have to do that? I'm tired from work. And it's like a punishment game to go to the hospital for someone who got into an accident due to carelessness.
Carelessness? Why are you talking like that? Besides, it wasn't my fault. It was the other drivers.
Stop nagging. Anyway, I'm not going, and I won't reply for a while. Figure it out yourself.
The call ended there. The busy tone echoed in my ear, pushing my heart to the limit. Before I knew it, I was in tears. Why did he speak like that? Aren't you worried about your wife who had an accident? He used to prioritize me over work. If I could, I'd want to get a change of clothes myself. My parents live far away, so I can't ask for their help. I sent several messages to my husband afterward, but he never brought my things. I had no choice but to buy everything I needed at the hospital store. Since then, I tried contacting my husband a few times, but 3 days had passed without a reply. He said he wouldn't reply for a while, but I was getting worried. No matter what, it's unusual not to have any contact for this long. What if he got into an accident too? That anxiety crossed my mind. That's when I heard a knock on the hospital room door. When I responded with yes, my coworker Jasmine, who I usually get along with, came to visit me. Jasmine, you came. Thank you.
I was surprised when I heard you had been in an accident after I contacted you since you hadn't been at work for a while.
It's not a big deal. Just some bruises and a broken bone.
It's more than enough. But I'm glad. You seem to be doing well.
For a while, we chatted and laughed about trivial things. As visiting hours were ending, Jasmine started to get ready to leave. But then, she stopped and looked troubled. I cautiously asked her, Jasmine, what's wrong?
I'm sorry, Harper. I don't think I should say this now, but I saw it.
Saw? What did you see?
I saw your husband walking with Daisy.
What? When did that happen?
3 days ago.
The Daisy Jasmine mentioned was a junior coworker at our company. I had been her mentor when she was a new employee. Even now, a few years later, we'd go to lunch together once a week. Why would she be with Christopher? Daisy and my husband should have last met at our wedding. Could it be? But there's no way they would do something like that. Despite thinking it was impossible, the worst-case scenario crossed my mind. According to Jasmine, she saw my husband with a suitcase and Daisy 3 days ago. Since then, Daisy has been on paid leave. I hesitantly called my husband's office, and my suspicion was confirmed. He had also applied for paid leave 3 days ago. At that moment, my suspicion turned to certainty. My beloved husband and the junior I cared for, being betrayed by both of them at the same time. Probably my husband's increased overtime and working on weekends were because he was meeting her. No, maybe they were already involved before that. As I recalled my husband's suspicious behavior, more and more things started to make sense. So that's why he became so cold. Surprisingly, it all made sense to me. Unconsciously, I called my husband. I hardly contacted him these past few days, thinking he wouldn't respond anyway. He probably wouldn't pick up after just a few attempts. But I couldn't just let him do as he pleased. I kept ringing his phone until he answered. 30 minutes after I started calling, my husband finally answered, sounding annoyed.
What's your problem? I told you I wouldn't answer for a while.
Why? Are you so busy that you can't even answer a call from your wife?
Of course, I'm working every day.
Even though you're on paid leave until tomorrow, what kind of work are you doing? Assuming he hadn't been caught yet, my husband hesitated for a moment. Still thinking he could deceive me, he quickly started making excuses.
What are you talking about? I didn't take any paid leave.
No use playing dumb. I already confirmed with the company.
No, well, actually, I just suddenly wanted to take it easy. I've been relaxing at home these past few days.
Oh, really? With Daisy? Even preparing a suitcase? I already know everything. Just confess. I couldn't help but raise my voice. Then, my husband realizing he couldn't hide it any longer, revealed his true colors.
Ah, so you found out. Yes, I'm on a trip with Daisy. Now that you know, stop bothering me, you ugly woman.
So, that's how it is. Why? Why with Daisy?
Why do you think? She's younger and cuter than you.
For such a reason.
Enough already. I'm having fun on this trip. Don't bother me. Don't worry. I'll divorce you when I get back.
He said,
See ya.
and hung up the phone. It was right after that. The love that I had for my husband turned into hatred. In an instant. I can't forgive him. To be betrayed in such a terrible way? I won't let them have their way. I'll definitely send them to hell. That's when I decided to take revenge on them. But before I could take matters into my own hands, divine punishment would come to them. The next day I was discharged from the hospital and started to regain some mobility. To prepare for my revenge, I opened my smartphone to search for a lawyer's office. Just then my phone rang. Daisy's name appeared on the screen. My husband's affair partner? Surprised for a moment, but I couldn't run away now. I gathered my courage and answered the call. Hello? Harper? Ma'am? I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Isn't it common sense to apologize in person? Yes, you're right. But that's not the point right now. Huh? Daisy's voice was somewhat shaky. Then she said something that made me doubt my ears. Your husband has died in an accident. What? I was so shocked that I couldn't find the right words. Confused, I barely managed to respond to Daisy. He's dead? What are you talking about? Christopher is on a cheating trip with you, isn't he? Yes, that's true. But on the way home, Christopher got caught in an accident. According to Daisy's story, it seems the two of them were in an accident on their way home from the airport. Christopher was hit by a car, and although an ambulance was called right away, he didn't move a muscle. To my surprise, the hospital Christopher was taken to was the same one I was staying at. I quickly hung up the phone, explained the situation to the nurse, and headed to my husband's side. I had to move using crutches as my broken bone hadn't fully healed. Since I heard he had died, I assumed I'd be taken to a morgue or something, but incredibly, Christopher was still alive. However, he was seriously injured. Just after I arrived, a breathless Daisy rushed in. Seeing Christopher lying in the bed, she collapsed on the spot when she realized he was still alive. I had a lot to say, but unfortunately Christopher was in critical condition. I told Daisy we'd talk later, and we each went home that day. Days later, Christopher barely pulled through, but the accident left him paralyzed from the waist down, forcing him into a wheelchair. My in-laws were furious when they found out about the affair trip. Although they must have felt something, seeing their challenged son, they scolded him clearly, saying,
You brought this on yourself by having an affair.
After my in-law left, I called Daisy and decided to have a talk with her and my husband. When I arrived at my husband's hospital room, they were having a loud argument.
If you hadn't pushed me that time, none of this would have happened. It's all your fault.
What? You're the one who wanted to take that route. Don't blame me.
What did you say? In the first place, this happened because you wanted to go on a trip. I paid for everything. Give me my money back. Pay for the treatment, you lousy woman. You hurt the man you love, so you should pay, right?
Don't be ridiculous. Who would get serious with a guy like you? This was just a fling. I'll never see you again.
What?
The two of them carried on their unbearable argument, apparently not realizing I was there. I couldn't take it anymore. I forcibly opened the door to the hospital room, took a deep breath, and shouted at them. Enough! It's because you had an affair in the first place that this happened. Take your blame game somewhere else.
Harper.
Ma'am. Finally realizing I was there, their faces quickly stiffened. Ignoring their confusion, I continued. How can you still argue in a situation like this? Do you even understand the situation you're in now? Christopher was the first to answer that question.
Harper, don't worry. I'm breaking up with this stupid woman.
So?
So I realized that it's always been you for me, Harper.
Huh, what are you saying now? We're getting divorced, right?
What?
I couldn't help but burst into laughter at my husband's dumbfounded expression. Didn't you say it? When I get home, we'll get a divorce, or what? Now that you've fought with your affair partner, you want to stay married to me. Are you an idiot? There's no way I'd spend my life with a piece of trash like you.
Harper, why? Didn't you love me?
Don't mess with me. Who betrayed that love first? It was you. After all that talk about getting a divorce, you want to get back together when it's convenient for you? I'm not as cheap as you think. If you understand that, never show up in front of me again. Keep regretting this for the rest of your life, you jerk. My husband was stunned by my yelling. Daisy was pale and trembling. Later, I was discharged from the hospital and decided to stay at my parents' house for a while. After that, my divorce from Christopher was finalized through a lawyer. I demanded alimony from him and Daisy, which they paid in full. Christopher was fired from his job due to this incident. It turned out he'd been using company money for their affair. Adding to his paralysis, he was easily dismissed. All that remained for him was a claim for damages from the company. Finding a new job with his condition would probably be difficult. It didn't take long for word of Daisy's affair with my husband to spread throughout the company. She was met with cold stares and eventually couldn't stand the atmosphere and began skipping work without permission. As a result, I heard she finally submitted her resignation. Now those two will probably never lead a decent life again. Even so, I don't feel sorry for them. This is a disaster they brought upon themselves. As for me, I rented an apartment near my workplace and started a new life. Many colleagues show concern or curiosity, but honestly, my feelings are mixed, and I can't describe how I feel. But such trivial rumors will probably die down soon. Now, I want to enjoy my life without being swayed by others. My name is Alyssa Johnson. I'm a 23-year-old office worker, married for 2 years now. I have a son, Leo, who just turned 1. My husband, Nathan, is 29 and also works for a company. Nathan frequently suggests that I quit my job at my father's company, a sentiment stemming from his dislike for my parents. His distaste for my parents appears to be linked to the fact that my father is a high school dropout and runs a small and grimy company, manufacturing screws and small components. Nathan hates the idea of people knowing he's related to such a company. On the other hand, I admire my father for his tireless dedication to research, his courage, not afraid of failure, and his genuine care for his employees. Thus, I have no intention of leaving my father's company. He seems to dislike the fact that I respect my father more than him. One morning, while having breakfast with Nathan and our son Leo, Nathan brought it up again.
Alyssa, you should really think about getting a job at a bigger company. Considering you graduated from a prestigious university, you're beautiful, and I want to brag about you at work. But I can't, because your workplace is awful. And honestly, I earn enough for us. Why don't you consider becoming a housewife?
This conversation has been over and over again. Every time it comes up, I repeat the same answer, that I will not quit my father's company. Typically, these discussions conclude with Nathan making threatening remarks to me like,
"You're the only one in the world who doesn't listen to me."
Or,
"If you keep this up, it's going to be harder for us to stay together."
After this, he usually leaves, but it doesn't end there. Following these discussions, Nathan often does something to upset me and then gloats.
"Still, won't you listen to me now?"
While I can't say divorce is out of the question, I can't bring myself to do it. Both our parents get along so well and love Leo so much, it would break my heart to upset them. My father and father-in-law are good friends, going golfing and fishing together. My mother and mother-in-law also get along very well, frequently going to art exhibitions together. Both sets of parents adore Leo and have provided him with a loving environment that I wouldn't want to take away. Regardless, my love for Nathan has faded away. I don't even like sleeping in the same bed with him. Since Leo was born, I've been sleeping in the child's room with a lock on the door. The reason I added the lock was that Nathan would come into the room while I was sleeping with Leo and start complaining about my father's company. Leo was scared and cried due to Nathan's loud voice in the dark. Since then, Nathan has stopped coming in at night, but I still lock the door just to be safe. As for the harassment I received from Nathan this morning for refusing to quit my father's company, it was as always, just as petty. Despite dinner being ready, he didn't come home. Instead, he went to a night bar with colleagues and sent me a photo of him with a big smile, his face close to one of the female staff. This kind of photo doesn't hurt me or make me feel insecure. As soon as I saw the photo he sent on my messaging app, a new message came in.
See, this is how I blow off steam, because you won't listen to me.
He said,
If you don't want me to do this anymore, quit your father's company now.
Honestly, I wanted to ignore his message, but for the sake of both sets of parents and our son Leo, I responded. This was my best response. I just wanted you to come straight home and have dinner with us. In response, he texted back.
Must have been tough, huh? I'm coming home now.
I found myself regretting marrying him, thinking even though he is smart, his character and thought process are so childlike. Then one day, Nathan happily reported,
I might be getting promoted soon.
Wow, that's great. Did that recent deal come through?
It's not finalized yet, but it's as good as done. I bet the boss will be thrilled, crying with joy. Even the director, who used to act so high and mighty, will have to bow down to me now. Ha ha.
That day, Nathan unusually didn't tell me to quit my father's job and went off to his company. As for me, I left home with Leo to go to my office. After dropping Leo off at my parents' house nearby as usual, I went to work, where my coworker, Jake, hurriedly approached me.
Good morning, Alyssa. The boss seems unusually angry today. Did something happen? Everyone is worried about him.
Upon hearing this, I knocked and entered the room marked Invention Room, where my father was. There sat a young man in his 20s, with a tear-streaked face on the sofa. Sitting across from him was my father, his face more furious than I had ever seen.
Sorry, Alyssa. I can't spare the time to chat with you right now,
he said, to which I responded, Everyone's worried about you. What's going on? Apologizing, he invited me to sit in on the conversation. As I took a seat next to my father and looked at the young man's face, he stood up to introduce himself.
Nice to meet you. I'm Scott. I'm sorry for causing the boss any trouble.
I asked him, May I know what happened? Scott, apparently an employee with an electrical machinery manufacturer, started to explain. It seems that Scott is employed at an electrical machinery manufacturer. Moreover, he's been promoted to the position of assistant leader for a new machinery project. Interestingly, the designated leader doesn't attend meetings or go to the field, basically serving as a figurehead. The team members reportedly prefer this, stating, It's easier that way. In essence, Mr. Scott was fulfilling the leader's role. It appears that some components from my father's company were chosen for the project. Scott, without any prior arrangement, visited my father's company and rudely demanded,
I need to speak to the CEO.
His appearance, characterized by his unkempt hair and numerous rings, didn't sit well with my father's secretaries, fondly known as Jackson and Randy, who told Scott,
Please adjust your attitude and appearance before coming back.
Unaware of what was wrong with his demeanor and looks, Scott returned to his company and asked his boss, who snapped,
Don't let them walk all over you. Assert yourself and tell them we're using their parts.
Wanting to fill his colleagues' wishes to use my father's company's components, Scott returned to my father's company and humbly asked Jackson and Randy,
Please let me know what I'm doing wrong.
My father, who happened to overhear the conversation, talked with Scott in the meeting room.
We don't judge people by their appearances. I believe they were just trying to teach you workplace manners,
his father said. Jackson and Randy agreed and proceeded to instruct Scott on professional etiquette. With such an appearance, when you visit other companies, they'll likely judge your entire company based on how you present yourself. When asked,
which company do you think one can have a decent conversation with? One where people are well-dressed and respectful of manners, or one that isn't?
Scott apparently replied,
the former, but let me apologize and start again.
Following that, Scott made an appointment, showed up with his back straight, fixed hair, and without any accessories. As we talked with Scott, we saw his sincerity and commitment to his work, not only in terms of components, but my father said that he was so willing to cooperate with ideas and knowledge. That's how they ended up collaborating. Young members of Scott's company proactively visited my father's company for advice. However, just before a prototype was almost completed after nearly 6 months, it was revealed that the leader had taken all the presentation materials that were prepared. Not only that, but the assistant leader was removed, and a young female employee who he favored was promoted. Although the team and the collaborators vehemently opposed this, they were silenced with threats such as, anyone who objects will be made uncomfortable in the company by spreading various rumors. Upon hearing this, my father was furious. Jackson, who had been listening in the background, said,
about those various rumors, they're just going to spread lies, right? You shouldn't be scared, right?
However, the reason the assistant leader was removed was apparently because he reported a violation of working hours to the HR department. Scott said that after severe warnings, the assistant leader was removed. The reason Scott came to my father's company this time was because he was frustrated that the person in charge would change despite all he had done for him, and he wanted to discuss everything.
You should quit that company and come work for ours, right, boss?
All right, Jackson and Randy, are you ready?
My father, impersonating an iconic Western movie character, made everyone except Scott burst into laughter. Scott said,
despite doing such amazing work, you all seem to be having fun. I've always admired that. I really wanted to work with you all.
And he pleaded with teary eyes, bowing his head joyfully to my father. There was something that had been bothering me after listening to his story. So I asked Scott a question. I asked, what's the name of your company? And it turned out to be the same machinery manufacturing company as my husband's. Hesitantly, I asked further, can I ask the name of the leader? And as I had feared, he replied,
his name is Nathan Johnson.
Upon hearing that, my father and I held our heads in shock. After a brief silence, Randy said,
I knew I'd heard that name before. It's Alyssa's husband.
I said, Scott, I'm sorry, that's my husband. And Scott said,
he's the one who gave me the opportunity to work at this company, so I'm actually grateful to him now.
Jackson seemed to have something on his mind, too, and asked cautiously,
I hate to ask, but given that Alyssa's here, does the favored female employee have any relation with your husband?
Scott looked at my face and seemed to have difficulty speaking. So I said, don't worry about it. I'm in a sham marriage with my husband. I don't have feelings for him anymore. Which surprised my father. After apologizing to my flustered father, I honestly told him about all the things that had been said and done to me every day, and why I hadn't been able to speak up. He understood and said,
no wonder my grandson Leo hasn't been very affectionate with me.
Then, after hearing everything, he added,
I've lived a life that I'm not ashamed of, so I don't care what anyone says about me. But it must be tough for Alyssa to keep hearing bad things about her parents. Don't worry, though. I'll keep my relationship with their parents since they're family and friends. If you ever want to come home, you're always welcome.
His words made me feel like a weight had been lifted from my shoulders.
And what about the relationship between your husband and this favored female employee?
Jackson asked. Scott replied,
There's no solid evidence, just rumors. But it's the talk of the company. Several employees have seen the two of them coming out of meeting rooms or document rooms. A few employees have even seen them going out for lunch together.
At this point, Randy began making a phone call.
Hey, I have a case that I'd like you to investigate. Can you come to the office right now?
After hanging up, he said,
I'm going to have a friend of mine at the private detection agency look into this.
Now, Jackson started to make a phone call as well.
Hello? I need a lawyer who specializes in divorce due to infidelity. Oh, you can? Can you come to the office right now? Thanks.
As Jackson and Randy made progress on their calls, my dad said,
Your greatest strength has to be your ability to take action.
He was laughing as he watched the scene unfold. Scott also offered to keep a careful eye on the two of them. For the time being, everyone returned to their workplaces to get back to work. My father, too, expressed his concern to the worried employees, saying,
I'm sorry for the concern, but it looks like we can laugh about it now. My apologies for causing worry, and thank you, as always.
Hearing this, smiles returned to the faces of the employees, and the usual lively atmosphere was restored in the workplace. My father came over to me and asked,
May I discuss the recent events with your in-laws?
To which I replied, I just want you to tell them to continue visiting and showing affection for Leo, as I always have. By early afternoon, a private detective and a lawyer arrived to discuss our future course of action in the planning room. The contents of this meeting were then shared with everyone present. It was decided that Jackson, who had returned to the company, would convey the details of the discussion. After work, when I went to pick up Leo from my parents' house, I explained the situation from my own perspective, apologizing for my inability to reveal my husband's true nature. I felt as if I had trampled on the feelings of my parents, who believed we were living happily. My mother, far from being upset, seemed thrilled, declaring, Now we need to prepare a room for my daughter and grandson. She had not missed the disdainful look my husband had given my father's company the first time he saw it, and suspected he was not a good man. I wish you had told me sooner. The next day, it appeared Jackson received a phone call on his smartphone from Scott. Scott had submitted his resignation, informing the company he intended to spend his remaining time on miscellaneous tasks and transitioning his responsibilities without taking any paid time off. The company accepted his resignation. However, all the members of the project team reportedly visited the HR department to state, We have all violated the company's work rules like Mr. Scott, so please discipline us as well. Upon seeing resignation letters in everyone's hands, the HR department was thrown into a frenzy. My husband had already left home by the end of regular working hours, so a meeting was held in the large conference room between the company president, department heads, and the remaining project members, including Scott. There it was stated that my husband, who was the team leader, had not attended any meetings or been present at work, and had in fact not contributed at all to the project. Further, it was reported that when he learned that the presentation and required documents had been completed by the entire team, he took all the credit, removed Scott from his position as deputy leader, and replaced him with a female employee he favored. The company president reportedly expressed deep regret if this was indeed true. At that point, Scott suggested that no drastic action be taken until all evidence was gathered. The reason he gave was that as the sister-in-law of one of the company's clients, they were also conducting an investigation using a private detective, and it was proposed that nothing be said to my husband without evidence. The company agreed to wait until the evidence was collected, and then to question my husband before deciding on disciplinary action. They asked the team members to hold off on their resignations. Unaware of these serious events, my husband, who usually comes home on time, returned home around 9 p.m. after Leo had gone to bed. He began ranting about how useless everyone else was, boasting about how he had been working overtime to make the project a success. He thought everyone was just jealous because he was going to be promoted to department head after the project's success. Knowing the truth, I couldn't help but chuckle at his delusions. In his good mood, I gave him a few compliments, which I didn't really mean. He seemed to enjoy picturing himself as department head, being looked up to and envied. My husband kept grinning. The next day at work, Scott's plan was put into action. All team members began to continuously praise my husband.
Mr. Department Head, not quite yet.
It seems the CEO is very hopeful about this project.
How can we become competent men like you, Mr. Johnson?
Continuously showered with such compliments, my husband was thrilled and in a constant state of excitement. His guard seemed to be dropping. Then, as planned, we were able to obtain a video of my husband's affair with a female employee from the hidden cameras set up in the document room and the conference room. In just 5 days, a ton of evidence of his infidelity had been collected by both the detective agency and Scott. All that was left was to prove that my husband had not been the one to create the project documents. The proof was easy. Scott had also saved the documents on a USB drive, and it would be clear to the company if they asked him and my husband about the contents of the documents. All of the evidence was submitted to the company by Scott and other members. My husband came home in high spirits, unaware of all of this. Then he began his flight of fantasy, saying,
I'm definitely going to be made department head. The CEO was talking to the current head for a long time. And then the head looked at me. He probably said, I'd rather have Mr. Johnson as head than any incompetent like you.
He then continued his fantasy talk.
With this, the gap between your father's company and mine will widen even more. You should quit your job and become a full-time housewife. You'll be the wife of a department head,
he said. I replied loudly, seemingly angry. Your parents will be mad if they knew you were mocking my parents. You know they're good friends. I take pride in my work and enjoy it. I will absolutely not quit. My husband got angry and said,
Never invite your parents to our family events. If you don't like it, get out. I'll have women flocking around me as soon as I become department head.
When I asked, Are you sure about this? He replied,
What do you mean? Don't contact me again.
So I responded, All right, I'll leave. And I had him sign the prepared divorce papers. The next morning, I saw my husband go to work in silence, and then I called my father to help me move. As my father, company workers, and I were loading our belongings onto a truck, my in-laws arrived saying, We came to help. My in-laws apologized to me, and I apologized to them. Thank you for letting us be Leo's grandparents. Our idiot son is disowned. We're counting on you from now on, Alyssa. As they both bowed their heads, I held their hands and said, Thank you, while also bowing my head. My father said,
Let's hurry up and move so we can relax at home.
To which my father-in-law responded,
Let's do that,
and continued helping with the move. The move went smoothly, and in front of my parents and in-laws, I showed them the signed divorce papers and explained that I was getting a divorce from my husband. My in-laws apologized repeatedly, but my father responded,
Let's continue to get along, Ken,
and playfully patted my father-in-law's knee. My mother said, Mary, let's continue to do embroidery together. There's an art exhibition next week. Let's go. And playfully patted my mother-in-law's knee. My father said,
Ken, Mary, why don't you stay at our house tonight? Let's have a drink.
And brought out some drinks. My father-in-law said,
Thanks. We'll take you up on that offer tonight.
And my parents and in-laws got along even better. Not wanting to get in the way, I decided to go to Leo's room and go to sleep. The next day, my husband was called into a conference room by executives like the CEO and department head. In addition to the executives, Scott, the team members, and the female employee he had an affair with were also there. The hearing for my husband was conducted by the CEO himself. First, He was asked if he intended to claim the project as his own without participating in it and stealing the documents when they were completed. Since Scott and the team members were present, it seemed he couldn't make any excuses. The CEO, growing impatient with my husband's silence, demanded loudly,
Well, what do you have to say?
My husband, it seems, quickly admitted to his actions. Next, he was asked why he had removed Scott from the sub-leader position and replaced him with a female employee. My husband responded,
I thought she was more capable than Mr. Scott.
But the department had retorted,
Are you saying the lady who does nothing more than serving tea and making copies is more capable than Mr. Scott?
My husband bit his lip, lowered his head, and fell silent. The CEO then exclaimed,
The real reason is this, isn't it?
And proceeded to project still images from the video footage taken in the conference room and the document room. Both my husband and the female employee, Alice, turned pale. When the CEO asked Alice,
Miss Ford, what is the meaning of this?
Alice responded unabashedly, Mr. Johnson said that if we were together, he'd make it easy for me to earn my salary. Besides, I have a boyfriend, so I wasn't serious about being with him. I just thought of it as part of the job. My husband was infuriated by her response, exclaiming,
You had a boyfriend, you cheating woman. You've ruined my life.
You have a wife too, Nathan. Don't get mad at me, Alice retorted, and a quarrel ensued. The CEO fed up and announced,
The fact-checking is over. I'll inform you of the disciplinary action later. Until then, Mr. Johnson and Miss Ford, you're both suspended and should stay at home.
With that, he left the conference room, and everybody else quickly followed suit. As a result, my husband was reassigned to the menial job of sorting documents in a basement, what's commonly referred to as a useless department at the company. Alice, after her boyfriend found out about her affair, had a hard time at the office and eventually chose to resign as well. A lawyer had prepared an agreement for them to sign, and my husband was to pay me $3 million and Alice $2 million as consolation money. They both ended up taking loans from consumer finance companies to cover these payments. Moreover, I had my husband agree to pay an additional $5,000 per month for Leo's child support. A few months later, my husband, who had been disowned by his parents, was working 2 jobs, at a convenience store during the day and as a security guard for a parking lot at night, and living alone in an old apartment. Someone who saw him said he looked as if he was about 60 years old. He had aged so much.